This episode of Harvey Brownstone Interviews is brought to you by the Harvey Brownstone Talk Show Blend Coffee, available at hollywoodblends.com. Everyone's saying it's the best coffee they've ever tasted. Why not give it a try and see for yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm Harvey Brownstone, and today's guest is a filmmaker from the United Kingdom who has produced a number of short films entitled Ironheart, Plated, White Feather, and now his brand new film entitled Hawker, which he wrote, produced, and directed. This short film tells the true story of Major Lanoe Hawker, who was Britain's first World War I ace pilot and a pioneer of early aviation combat. The movie focuses on the activities of July 25th, 1915, when Hawker, who was at that time a captain, became the first British pilot to successfully shoot down an enemy aircraft by mounting a Lewis gun to the side of his Bristol Scout airplane. Here's the trailer. Watch this.
7th of June, 1915. I have a beautiful little toy. A new Bristol Scout.
Contact! Not the best landing.
I blame whoever put that fence there.
Tell me, Captain, did this hostile aircraft engage you whilst out on your observation duties? Or dare I suggest you were out looking for trouble?
That is why we must have a Lewis gun on our fastest machines.
Unauthorized homemade machine gun mount.
So what now? We shoot them all down? We clear the skies and win the war? Or do they come back with machine guns on the front of their own Scout? And every one of us is faced with the same decision to jump or burn.
This ambitious and exciting film, which is being released on November 23rd, was a labor of love for our guest, whose interest in aviation originated when he trained in aerospace manufacturing. He went on to be an officer cadet at RMA Sandhurst, and after his discharge from the British Army, he began his career in the arts as an actor, graduating from Mountview Academy of Theatre Arts in 2011. After appearing in 7 films, he turned his attention to writing, producing, and directing. And in 2016, he formed his own production company called Middle Realm Productions. I'm delighted to welcome Daniel Arbon to our show. Daniel, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Daniel, first of all, congratulations on the movie. I watched it and I thought it was wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you.
How did you come up with the idea to make this film?
The original idea came actually when I was researching my previous film, which you mentioned, White Feather. White Feather was a story from my own family. It was my great grandfather who was a conscientious objector in the First World War. And he was famously given a white feather, and that was the subject of the film that I was making. But when I was researching white feathers, there was a book I was reading called The Courage of Cowards, and it had a lot of famous stories about people that were given this white feather treatment. And there was one chapter dedicated to Lanoe Hawker. And the funny irony is that when he was in kind of late 1915, when he was back home, I think it was around about the time he was receiving his Victoria Cross, which is the highest gallantry medal in the British system. He was actually dressed in plain clothes, and he was famously given a white feather by people who thought he was a coward and a shirker. So he thought that was hilarious. Man, the irony of it wasn't lost on him, and he took it home, and they all had a great laugh at that. But that made a chapter in the book that I was reading, and that it piqued my interest. And I remember it was one evening, and I describe it as falling down a Wikipedia rabbit hole where you where you look somebody up and then you click on the next link and then you click on the next link and suddenly several hours have gone past. I realized that there was a huge gap in my own knowledge about the early World War I aviation. And I think the thing that really triggered me was I'd read about Lanoe Hawker and that he'd put the Lewis gun on the side of his machine so that he didn't shoot his own propeller off. And then I realized, yeah, hold on, how did they shoot through the propeller? And so the whole technology of the synchronized machine gun, which Lanoe Hawker didn't have, was complete new information to me, and I found it fascinating, and I found the story of Lanoe Hawker fascinating, and I'd kind of gone down this rabbit hole of information, soaking it all up, and I did what so many people do, is you think, oh, I'd love to see a film about that. So again, I looked and I think, oh, there isn't one. So that's when the wheels in my filmmaker brain said, I wonder if I could make one. And really, that was the seed of everything that came over the next 4 years.
What, in your opinion, makes Lanoe Hawker so special?
I think there's a number of reasons. I think his story, I think there's two things. There's his story and there's also him as a person. I think his story, I love an origin story. So he's there at a pivotal moment in history, and he's one of the key characters at a pivotal moment. So before him, aeroplanes in military use were there for observation. And he was that pivotal point where they became fighter planes, which is something we still have today. Now, I'm not saying he was the only one, but he was one of the key characters, and he was certainly one of the biggest characters from the British side. So there's a definite kind of the story change. There's a real arc to the story of where he goes in that pivotal moment. But I also think him as a person, I think he is a gift for a filmmaker, because he's such a complex character. And I think as a filmmaker, your lead character has to be complex, because if you get into two-dimensional characters, especially as a lead, it can get very, very boring as a film. So having somebody who is a really deep character, really difficult to understand, really complex, lots of different emotions and feelings and complexity of character, I just think he's a gift, and I think he's a very, very likable character as well. And I just think going forward, and especially, I mean, I only kind of scratched the surface on a short film, but in a longer feature film, which I would like to make, I think he has all of the characteristics to be a really, really compelling character.
And of course, his death is particularly significant for two reasons. He was involved in the longest dogfight of World War I, and he was killed by the infamous Red Baron, Manfred von Richthofen, correct?
Yeah, that's correct, yes.
Now, this short film focuses on one specific day in Lanoe Hawker's life and career. What made you choose that day?
I think the thing about that day, rather than, say, for example, his famous fight with Richthofen, is I think it made quite a kind of a really connected, kind of isolated story in itself that I felt worked well with a short film. I think having just this little story as part of a bigger story, I felt worked really well. And like I said, I do like that. It's that pivotal moment. So it's a really dense moment that I felt worked in the short form factor, maybe 15 to 20 minutes, which is what I originally aimed for. I think obviously his larger story is a great story, but I think you need the time in a bigger film to get it all in and do it justice properly.
In the film, we see Hawker use the mounting for the Lewis gun on his Bristol Scout plane, but we don't see much about why or how he developed it. Do you know how he came up with the idea?
No, not really. There was a fair amount of deduction that went on. What we do know is that he worked in conjunction with one of his flight mechanics, a chap named Ernest Elton, who himself actually went on to be a great pilot. But at the time, he was a mechanic, and he worked together with Hawker to create this mount. Really, that's all we know. So it was very interesting when I actually came to build one. we didn't have that much information at all. So other than some very old photographs, it was really a case of, well, how would they have done it with what they had? How would they have done it? And so a lot of it really is kind of guesswork on our side, because all we have really is the final process. But I did find it very, very interesting when you actually have it on a plane and seeing. So there was one thing I was wondering how it's sighted, and it's actually when we had built the machine gun and sat it and actually sat in the cockpit, you realized that there was a natural line of sight from where you're sitting to the front of the gun. And you're thinking, oh, there must be a foresight here, a rear sight somewhere. And when we went back to the photos, and you see this tiny little piece of grainy thing, it's just like, actually, I think that is a rear sight attached to the strut. So, and we wouldn't have really seen that unless I'd actually sat in the machine and realized there's a direct line from my eye to the gun sight there.
It's amazing. Tell me, how did you go about financing the film?
So originally it was kind of my own savings to get me started. So there was a bit of a process before we took it public, because there was this thing that I needed to. Obviously, it is a highly ambitious project, and I knew for a fact there would be a lot of doubters out there. Said, "Oh yeah, kind of pull the other one. Nice try." So I needed to kind of convince them that I could do it. And I think before I did that, I needed to convince myself that I could do it. So I spent a little bit of time at the beginning doing a lot of tests, a lot of test shots of my miniatures, and I built the cockpit and stuff like that. So a lot of that I kind of just invested in myself until I got to a point really that I felt that I could sell it to the public. So we made up a little trailer that had myself as Lanoe Hawker, and we shot that in my garden with my cockpit. And we made this in order to kind of sell it to the public, that these are our test shots. And we then took it to crowdfunding. So we went via Kickstarter, and yeah, we ended up exceeding our target a little bit, and then we had some more private backers on the top of the Kickstarter. So we became partners with the Great War Aviation Society, were one of our big partners. That they came in after the crowdfunder, and they've been a huge help kind of in the latter stages as well.
Well, you deserve a lot of credit for getting so many people to contribute to the making of the movie, given that it's a relatively narrow topic. Now, the production values, the special effects, the cinematography are outstanding, Daniel, especially for a film on essentially a shoestring budget. How did you manage to produce such a high quality film with such tight financing?
I think the thing for me is it's probably just time. And I think, like, I mean, the cinematography, I have to give credit to Ash Connaughton, who is a cinematographer. He's absolutely wonderful with his lighting and his camera work. And I've worked with him before in White Feather, and I've really got on well with him. I think for me, I love production design. So I do spend a lot of my effort goes into sets. And I think for me that the gift really was just having quite a long time to really put into it, because I decided early on to use my own house. So we basically we bought a fixer-upper, and and I realized that this could be used as the set because it's a Victorian age house. It's the right period. So we ended up knocking more holes in it than it had originally to make it look rougher. But because it was my own house, there was no time limit. It wasn't like a studio where I had to be in on the Friday and shooting on the Monday. It was I could take several weeks to get those internal shots the way I wanted, and I did do that. So that was a real luxury that you're not going to have in unless you've got the big money to be hiring big studios. So things like that was definitely a help. And like I say, just having the time to get into the details, because I do love detail. So having that lack of pressure just because I'm on my own definitely has its pluses as well.
The Bristol Scout airplane that you used in the movie has quite an interesting history, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So David Bremner, he was him, his brother, and Theo Wilcott. David found, I think it was the joystick and a rudder and a magneto in his garage, and they realized that it belonged to his grandfather, and it was the original pieces from the plane that his grandfather had flown in World War One, and they decided to basically make the rest of the plane around these original pieces. So it's a fascinating story. It took them many years, but they eventually got it airworthy, and it is absolutely beautiful machine. So yeah, we've very, very privileged to have David and that machine on board.
And the German plane, an Albatros C, also looks very authentic. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so the Albatross C was that was a difficult one because there are none left. So I really wanted it to keep it historically accurate. So because there's no actual flying replicas around, there's some the closest we have really is some cockpits and little bits of an Albatross C type that are in a museum in Poland, which I went to visit a number of years ago to take my photos. But yeah, that's it. So it posed the problem of how do we get these German planes, because we can't use real ones. So that was when I started going down the route of miniatures, and then ultimately ended up with CGI instead of the miniatures. And then again with the cockpits, the close-up shots, we built a turret and a machine gun, because you're getting quite tight into the shot at that point. So that was all constructed. But yeah, the majority of the German footage is a combination of the miniatures and CGI.
It's very realistic, very convincing. Now, this project took you 4 years from conception to completion. What would you say was the most challenging aspect of making this film?
I think the most challenging is definitely budget. is doing things on a tight budget. It can be it has its positives and it has its negatives. Obviously, everything has to be confined to what you can actually do. So there are lots of things that as a filmmaker in your head you say, oh, I would love to have that shot, but you just physically can't afford it. And then there are other shots you think, oh, I would really like to be able to tell that story, but I can't afford to do it the traditional way. How do I still tell it with what I can do? So there is a lot of, it does require a lot of creativity there. So I'm not saying it's entirely a bad thing doing things on a tiny budget, but it does make things more difficult, because you're calling in a lot of favors. You're asking people to work for considerably less than what they would normally go out for. So it's yeah, like I say, it's a lot of friends, it's a lot of favors, it's a lot of just asking, just a lot of cheeky questions, saying, "Can we please do this? We don't have any money," and hoping people say yes, and they don't always say yes. So it does make life difficult.
That's for sure. And you deserve a lot of credit for your perseverance. Look what you've produced. Now, you, Daniel, you made a decision at some point to make a switch from acting to writing, producing, and directing. What made you decide to make that pivot in your career?
I would say I wouldn't say it's so much a switch as an addition. I would hate to think that I would stop acting completely, and I do very much want to continue acting as I go forward. I think my kind of shift of focus to filmmaking, I realized I couldn't really do both at the same time, especially when you're starting out making your own films. You tend to be self-funded, so it came a case of I don't have I don't have the time to be an actor and self-fund my own films because I need to be working. So I work as a builder, so I had to do building work in order to pay for to fund my films. So that was why the acting got shifted slightly to the side. But like I say, I do hope to get it back again. But to answer your question, I think for me, there's so much more than being acting. Now, I love acting, but what I realized as an actor is that actually it's quite a small part of a much bigger picture. And often as an actor, you don't get to see that bigger picture, especially when you're talking green screen studio shots and stuff like that. Obviously, an actor can go in, put on their costume and be in this green room and deliver their lines. And you're kind of thinking, well, there's not much magic there. You're doing your job, but a lot of that magic comes in the bigger picture that it is the filmmaker. So I think when I became an actor, like you get kind of swept up in the fantasy of like the Lord of the Rings or Gladiator or something like that, and you kind of you fancy yourself there, like being Russell Crowe in the Colosseum fighting lions to Hans Zimmer's music and all that, and you get carried, and there's a real romantic, wow, I'd love to do that. But then you actually realize when you become an actor that there is no Colosseum, there are no lions, you don't hear the music playing, like you're still doing a great job. And like I say, I still love acting, but to actually get to that point, like especially music, because I love music and music is very, very important to me in films. As an actor, especially as a film actor, you never hear that music. You only hear that music when you watch the final thing. But as a filmmaker and as an editor and a director, you're playing that music, you're choosing that music, you're working on the music with the composer, and you're timing the shots to the music, and all of that magic I absolutely love, again, because it's part of that bigger picture.
I know your long-term goal is to have this story made into a feature-length film. What's the plan to make that happen?
At the moment, there isn't so much plan as much as a kind of let's see what happens. Certainly, what I'm trying to do right now is get the film into festivals, get it into the vision of people in the industry. I'm hoping to. What I want is to have a successful enough film, successful with the general public, which is incredibly important, because obviously if you want to sell a film, you have to sell a film that the general public have to want to watch it. So obviously making a film that has proven to be popular with the general public is a massive, massive step. It's then getting it under the noses of producers who have the capability to turn it into a bigger film and say, look, this is what we've done. The public like it. There is a market for this. Let's have a conversation.
Well, that's why you're on our show. One of the reasons we wanted you on the show is because we believe in you as a filmmaker. We believe in the movie, and we want to help promote and expose what you've done. So tell me, when you make the full-length film, do you think you'll be using the same actors?
I don't know. I would like to. I think all of these things are up to discussion. I think it would largely depend on the producers. I mean, all of my actors, I was absolutely thrilled with the job they did in the short film. The problem possibly in the future is that none of them are a household name, and the film industry always has this balance of especially at the higher budget, those studios are going to need named actors, because unfortunately that is very much what the public want, and films without named actors just don't sell. So unfortunately we do have to play that game. So like I say, a lot of these things will certainly be up for negotiation, and we'll see what happens.
Well, I hope that you get to direct the feature film, and I'm going to be interested to see whether Daniel Arbon, the director, ever has a conflict with Daniel Arbon, the writer. What do you think?
I don't know. I think when you are the writer and director, I think you tend to, I mean, I'd love to hear what other people think, but I think you tend to not have conflict because you're one and the same thing. So I think when you are writing it, you're writing it and directing it at the same time. Whereas I think if you're writing for somebody else directing, that will absolutely be conflict, because I would have a very, very definite directorial vision for what I'm writing. Now, like I say, I don't know what other writer-directors would find for that, but certainly for me and the way I write, really, I don't think I'm a writer as much as a recorder. So the film is in my head. I close my eyes and I see the film that I want to make. So really my writing is recording what's going on in my head. So really what's going on in my head is directed by me. So the writer is really kind of, like I say, is recording the director in my head.
Well, that means you're a visual writer. Does dialogue come easy to you?
I would say reasonably, and I think that's probably coming from an actor's background. I very much, when I write, I see myself like as an acting in the parts. So even if it's a 2 or 3 hander, I probably play each character in my head. So yes, in many ways, I give them the voice that I would give them as an actor, put it on. Like I say, because I don't come from a writing background, so I'm not a novelist, I'm not a playwright or anything. I'm very much a film and actor. Yeah, it really is me playing each character and writing down what that character says.
Well, it works. So don't change that technique because it works. Now, this film, Hawker, is being released on November the 23rd, which is the anniversary of Lanoe Hawker's death. Tell us how people can see the movie.
Well, so we are streaming on Vimeo.com. There'll be links on my website, which is hawkerfilm.com. You can find that, or social media. There'll also be links to Vimeo, or you can go to Vimeo directly and search, and it should come up.
Can people buy DVDs as well?
They can. Unfortunately, I don't think they're going to be ready for the 23rd, but we're working on it right now. They are currently being printed. So at the moment, we're just waiting on collecting delivery and setting up where we will be selling them, whether that's directly through the website or via eBay or somewhere. But again, my website and social media is definitely the place. We will, as soon as they're available, we will be announcing it and making it very, very clear.
You know, I was just thinking, if you were able to, I would love to see this interview be a special feature on the DVD, because we've covered so much about the making of the film. I think the viewers would really enjoy it.
Yeah, I think that's a great possibility. Unfortunately, I don't have that much in the in the workings for special features, but certainly as we go forward, it is something I would like to look at, getting some of the things, including this as special features. I think it would be a nice addition. But at the moment, the first DVDs don't have special features, but hopefully in kind of next editions, then yeah, I think that'd be a great idea.
I want to repeat what Daniel just said to our viewers. You can learn more about Daniel Arbon and his film Hawker by going to the movie's official website, hawkerfilm.com. You know, Daniel, there was one line in the film that really moved me, and it was when each side in the war referred to their enemy as a gallant foe. That really highlights the stark difference in the way we fight wars nowadays compared to the conduct of the soldiers in World War I, don't you think?
Yes, I think certainly the pilots had in World War I definitely had a mutual respect for each other, and there's a lot of kind of historical looking back and saying that, because a lot of them came out of the cavalry, and there was very much this kind of chivalric code of the knights that became the Knights of the Sky, and I think there was a very definite respect between the flyers, that they respected the danger of the job that they were both in, and the mutual kind of no hard feelings. You're trying to kill me and I'm trying to kill you. We're in this together. So yes, that definitely did happen, and there were messages sent back and forwards. Certainly a number of notable messages when they said "you're" whatsoever. They would claim the kill and they would notify them, and they would honor them, and they would often give them an honorable burial as well. That it didn't happen quite so much in the infantry and on the ground. I think purely because of logistics of shell fire and all the mud, but there were still a lot of they still did bury bodies, which obviously later got exhumed to burials. But at the time, I mean, when Hawker was killed, he was buried by his machine by the Germans. They didn't just leave him there to rot. He was given a Christian burial.
Wow. Well, Daniel, I'm delighted to have had this chance to promote your film on our show, because it's an important story worth telling. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me, and I wish you the best of luck with the movie.
Thank you so much. It's been absolutely delightful.
Our guest has been Daniel Arbon, whose latest film, entitled Hawker, will be available for viewing on Vimeo on November 23rd, 2023, and the movie will also be available eventually for purchase on DVD. You can find out all the details by going to the film's website, hawkerfilm.com. My name is Harvey Brownstone. Thank you to my producer, Steve Silver, my director of programming, Deborah Batsifin, my production assistant, Rosa Puzo, and my entire team at the XPTV1 network in the UK. Thank you all for joining us. See you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out all the great interviews on the Harvey Brownstone Interviews YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified when new videos are posted.